We saw how our fear of not having enough, of not belonging, of not being loved, twisted and distorted our souls and our ability to connect one to another. God has been trying for centuries to give us another story. In fact, that is all God has been trying to do throughout time. Because somehow we got it in our heads that the person with the most stuff wins, which makes power and money our ultimate idols. And anything that threatens that idol becomes the enemy. Because in our story, people are mostly disposable unless they serve an ultimate purpose. And the ones with the most power and the most money make the rules for everyone else. And they teach that story in our schools. And they teach that story in our families. And we fight for our place in that story because we are terrified of living any other way. And so money and power rule everyone's lives. Some have it, and some don't. And so the world keeps splitting and splitting and splitting, all because of our stuff, our golden calves, and the terror of not having enough to share, and there simply not being enough to go around. And through the whole gospel story, people are arguing and fighting to keep their way of life. Or they're begging Jesus to please give them another. And so children go hungry every single day. And our minds become warped from this daily dose of selfishness and greed, until we become illogical, unreasonable, stubborn, and as Moses would have said, stiff-necked. And soon evil creeps into our hearts, just like it did at the Last Supper, when poor Judas, who loved the Lord with all his heart, let the political agenda and the fear of religious leaders twist his heart and yank on his story so hard, he felt he had no way out but the same old way. The same old way of blame and attack. Evil whispered in his heart that love is a weakness. Compassion is weakness. Sharing is dangerous. And this guy, Jesus, he's nothing but trouble. You want to get a hand up in this world? You better worship the idol. Torn and tormented, frightened beyond belief, because his story was not jiving with the story that Jesus offered, Judas panicked. And he ran back to the world of money and power, back to the world of us against them. And later, he sorely regretted it. His choice of money and power over Christ. And the other disciples, they slept. They slept in their grief and their fear, having just been told that one of their dearest friends was about to betray their beloved Jesus. They were shocked by the news and all of this talk about death and violence, and that it might actually be true and not just another one of his crazy parables. In their hearts, I imagine that they too must have been crying out, "My God, My God, why have you forsaken me? Any one of us who have walked this Holy Week of Palm Sunday, Maundy Thursday, and Good Friday Vigil have surely known the presence of the Lord. It has been stunningly palpable in this chapel. We stepped over the threshold into the sacred story and lived in these moments as if they were our very own. Because remember, they are. We just keep forgetting. Easter is the birth of a new story. One each of us must say whether we accept or not. This is our Peter moment, where we're sitting in the courtyard with imperial soldiers and religious leaders and immigrants and the poor, and we're being asked, who do you choose? Whose story are you going to tell? If you choose the dominant story, well, then you're safe. Life can go on as usual. You can go back to your fishing. You can go back to obeying the empire's rules. You can go back to keeping your mouth shut and your head down. Take your 40 pieces and let the big boys rule the world. But if you choose his story, you are in deep trouble, Peter, my man. Because you've got to start examining your whole life. Every thought, every decision, who you love, who you hate, who you work for, how you spend your money, how you vote, and why, and who eats at your table every night for the rest of your life. You know that table, the one with the lepers and the homeless and the tax collectors and the prostitutes and whoever else that we want to call other. And you've got to be willing to draw a line in the sand when they come for that adulterous woman. You know, the woman without rights over her own body. And you've got to step across the boundary in Samaria, the land of your enemies, and offer them a cup of water. And you're going to have to turn over a few tables and knock down a few walls. And you're going to have to break a few rules and get hateful stares. And the only thing that should come out of your mouth, the only thing that you should pull out of your pocket or grab from the back of your truck is love. That is your weapon of choice. That is your currency. We disarm with love. And then you walk the rest of your life trying to live up to his. Because that's the only thing that matters now. Everything he thinks of you. Because that is what disciples do. They devote themselves to becoming like the master. If you want to be a master cellist, a master composer, a master ballerina, a master economist, a master engineer, a master teacher, you devote yourself to the teachings of the masters. In 1922, the great composer Giacomo Puccini was suddenly stricken by cancer while working on what was to be his last opera, Turandot. Puccini said to his students, "If I don't finish the opera, I want you to finish it for me." Shortly afterwards, he died. And Puccini's students did as their master asked. They diligently studied his opera, and they soon completed it. In 1926, the world premiere of Turandot was performed in Milan, directed by Puccini's former student, Arturo Toscanini. Everything went beautifully until the opera reached the point where Puccini had been forced to put down his pen. Tears ran down Toscanini's face. He stopped the orchestra and he turned to the audience and he said, "Thus far the master wrote." And then he died. A silence fell on the opera house. Toscanini smiled through his tears and exclaimed, "But his disciples finished his work." And the audience broke into thunderous applause. Friends in faith, we have been called to finish the Master's work, his symphony of radical, extravagant, unconditional love. The world may call us crazy when we feed the hungry, when we visit the sick and the imprisoned, when we love our enemy and invite those we are scared about to worship with us, when we welcome the stranger and the outcast and the marginalized, and when we work relentlessly for justice. But when the world sees us coming, may they say of us, as was said of the first disciples those many centuries ago, "See how they love one another."